So, I wanted to spend a little bit of time to talk about how Black women can actually travel internationally safely. There has been countless stories that I've ran across of different lovely Black women who have gotten in harm's way. Some of them who've gotten into jail, some of them who've been hurt, some of them who've been mistreated, some of them have faced violence. I mean, it just the story goes on. So, while of course you can't guarantee that you're not going to face some challenges going abroad, there are definitely steps that you can take to ensure that your international travels are as safe as possible. And that's what I want to address in this video. It's actually a lot more simple than you think. The number one most important rule to traveling safely abroad as a Black woman is one, making sure you go with a man or making sure you are going with a group, preferably with men in it. Now, I know all you independent minded single ladies who don't have a man, who don't want a man, who feel empowered to do whatever, may not like this idea, but the reality is, in America and in some Western countries in general, there are liberties and there's freedoms that women enjoy, and a woman maybe can travel freely throughout those countries and be relatively safe. But there are also plenty of countries around the world that don't operate like the West, and they have more traditional values. And many of those places think it is improper for a woman to travel by herself. And so a lot of these different stories that I see where Black women are getting themselves in harm's way, they're being mistreated, they're upset, they feel unloved, they feel unseen, they feel unprotected. It's simply because they are in an environment as a single woman where it is improper for women to be going around by themselves. It's just that simple, and it has nothing to do with their race. It has nothing to do with anything other than them not properly assimilating into that culture. And so I know it's really hard for Western women, for American women to get this, but we have to understand that there are still a lot of places in the world that again, see it improper for a woman to be going around by herself. So if you want to avoid being targeted, if you want to avoid being mistreated, if you want to avoid facing any scrutiny, if you want to avoid any of that different stuff, it's probably going to be safer if you go with a guy. It just is what it is. This is a prime example of where not all genders are treated equal, right? Men are going to be perceived differently when they are going abroad. They just are. Right? There's just a different perception of when you see a man traveling alone versus when you see a woman. And again, this perception is increased even more so when you're in countries that are a lot more conservative. I mean, there are some countries where they see you traveling alone, they may assume that you're a prostitute or a woman of the night, and they're going to treat you accordingly. So again, that is a really strong way, is to either go with a man, or like I said, if that can't happen, you can also go with a group. I've traveled a lot abroad in groups. I did different mission trips with different churches and different organizations, and I wasn't in a relationship at the time, but I had developed relationships with people in the group. There were leaders who were already there, who had already established connections with the locals that we were going, and so it was a safe place for me to go because there are these precautions done beforehand. We had meetings, or I got to meet these people, so it was just a completely different environment. Like, I wasn't just going there by myself. And again, I know these are things that may not necessarily be the most exciting for the lovely ladies to hear, but at the end of the day, you have to understand that the world just simply does not see you as equal as men, especially not all across the world. And this is why I think the number one way to ensure that you are treated with respect is to either go with a man, preferably your husband, right? Husband, or maybe your brother, dad, whatever, or go with a group, a trusted group that you guys have established connections beforehand. And again, preferably there are trusted men in that group. And then obviously outside of that, doing the best that you can to try to understand the culture, whether that means maybe trying to pick up the language a little bit, understanding what's the normal dress code, just getting understanding and protocol about how men and women act and treat each other in this society, like doing your due diligence. Even if you decide to live abroad for a particular amount of time, maybe because of work or something like that, it would be really good to understand, okay, well, what's the work culture? What are the rights that workers have or don't have? Because again, there are situations sometimes where people go abroad and they're coming from an American standpoint where they feel like they have particular whites of employees, and that's not always the case in these other countries, and they get mistreated and they get surprised, and it just, it ends up being a whole mess. And so if you're going to work abroad, again, understanding what are the rights that I have, what are the protections that I have. And if you see that there aren't really any protections, if you see that you really are putting yourself at risk, again, you get to decide as a woman especially, is this safe? So again, just doing your due diligence to try to understand the culture, understand how do men and women treat each other, how are women perceived in the society, what are protocols, what is the dress code. If you're going to a place that's a lot more modest, get understanding on what is modest based upon that cultural context, not based upon the American cultural context, because it's very liberal out here. I mean, the fact that I have my arms out, right, in certain cultures would be considered very risque, right? But in America, having your arms out, that's like not a big deal at all. There's nothing sexy or provocative about that. So just understanding, okay, am I going to a more conservative country? Does this mean I need to cover up from head to toe? Do I need to have a head wrap? Like, all these things really make a big difference. And when those precautions aren't taken and we just feel like we can go abroad and move freely like we are men, like in the way that we move freely in America, again, it is just an easy way to set ourselves up for disappointment, and it's sometimes for a lot of danger. So I think, again, traveling abroad can be a great thing. You can have a lot of fun, and it can be relatively safe if you take the right precautions. This is why I personally do not recommend traveling internationally by yourself. Of course, there's going to be a few exceptions. Like, right, I have like one of my cousins, she was in the military for like 10 years. So she travels by herself all the time, but she's also strapped, right? And she also is used to being in harm's way. She just has a totally different mentality. So I understand there's going to be some of you out there who want to be the exception to the rule. But I think for a large majority of us, it's going to be better and safer for us to try to take the safe route. And if that means making sure that you are going with somebody, like I said, a husband, or if that doesn't happen, if you're not there, maybe your brother, somebody in your family, trusted friend, something like that, traveling with them, or a group that you can also trust. Again, I think those are ways to just ensure that you are not out there fending for yourself in the event, God forbid, something happens. Because again, people are just less inclined to try things on you when it looks like you're protected. That's just really what it boils down to. And if they see that you're walking around and you have a guy by you, whatever, you're gonna be less inclined to have a man try to go and take advantage of you, or just have somebody try to run over you in general. I'm not saying, again, it's perfect, but it can really help alleviate some of the issues that we face, or some of the issues that you can face as women when you are literally out there by yourself. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Really simple, but I think also can make a big difference in how you can experience the world. Those are my thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know. Leave your questions, comments, concerns in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening if you've gotten this far, and we'll talk later. Bye.